Anyone who's watched my channel before knows of my fondness for all things German and Bavarian. Well, that all started after my first Oktoberfest. So what makes this annual beer festival so special and unique? Well, to understand, it's important to know that the origins of Oktoberfest are Bavarian. In fact, a lot of the things that outsiders like me have associated with Germany are actually Bavarian, like lederhosen, dirndls, and these cool alpine hats. Bavaria is Germany's largest state in the south of the country. It shares an alpine border along with some culture with Austria. Bavarians have their own unique language, culture, food, and traditions. Locals in this region have been growing hops for over 1,000 years, or just as long as Bavaria's been around. This helps explain why over half the breweries in Germany are located here. In those early days, beer was even more popular than it is today. From the 11th century, monks and nuns began brewing beer in monasteries. In fact, Munich's oldest independent brewery, Augustinerbräu, originated from the Augustinian monastery, located just outside the city walls in 1328. Keep in mind that sanitation at breweries in the 1400s is not exactly like what we have today. Brewers would often adulterate their beer to mask any off flavors with things like wood chips and even poisonous ingredients that could end up making people very sick. Because of this, and a few other reasons that we'll get into in a moment, the Duke of Munich codified that only hops, barley, and water could be used to make beer. By 1516, this had evolved into what is now the Reinheitsgebot, or purity order, and was adopted all across Bavaria. Now, the other side of this order was also to help limit the profits that taverns could charge for beer, which also made it easier for the government to tax since the price was fixed. Another effect of the law is that it left more wheat available for bakers, which helped improve price stability of staples like bread. By now, you might be noticing that Bavarians take their beer very seriously, which is one of the reasons that when the king issued a decree in 1844, which increased the price of beer, people didn't take it too well. It began 5 days of what will become known as the Beer Riots of Munich. This unrest spread throughout the rest of Bavaria and caused damage to many shops, government offices, and 33 breweries. In order to quell the unrest and restore peace, the order was rescinded, bringing the price of beer back down, but the damage was already done. Mind you, this was only an 8% increase in the price of beer, but this poorly timed tax, along with other social issues at the time, boiled over into rioting and months of turmoil. Even though the people were upset with the king, they do have him to thank for the original Oktoberfest. 30 years earlier, in 1810, a young Ludwig of Bavaria was to marry Princess Theresa. Ludwig's father, King Maximilian, wanted the celebration to be one for the history books, with festivities all across Munich from Marienplatz to Neuhauserstrasse. To make sure that there was enough drinks to go around, Prince Ludwig commissioned Joseph Schorr along with some other Munich brewers to make over 23,000 liters of beer for the festivities. The week of partying peaked with a horse race which took place on the meadow outside of the city gates. This land was donated by heir Schorr himself and was later renamed by King Max to Theresienwiese, or Teresa's Meadow. A few years later, in 1816, the first carnival rides began to appear at Oktoberfest. The start of the festival was eventually moved up into September to take advantage of better weather. Despite the marketing you might hear from organizers about the festival being over 200 years old, there haven't actually been 200 Oktoberfests. It's been canceled many times, including just 3 years after it got started when a war with the Napoleon Empire put a damper on the party. It was canceled several more times during the 1800s due to cholera outbreaks and other various conflicts. Of course, during World War II, Oktoberfest was canceled and it didn't come back until 1946 as an autumn festival, but they only served a lower alcohol beer, so I'm not sure if that counts. Oktoberfest really came back in 1949, and it has not been canceled since 2020. Not just any brewery is allowed to take part in Oktoberfest. The regulations require that beer come from breweries located inside of Munich city limits. The beer served at Wiesn is from the Club of Munich Brewers, which include the following beer makers. Augustinerbräu is Munich's oldest and still independent brewery. The Augustinian monks also brewed beer for the Bavarian royal family until 1589, when they were replaced by Hofbräu, but more about that in a moment. From my experience, Augustiner seems to be the most popular of the Munich breweries with the locals. Next up, we have Löwenbräu, or Lion's Brew. This is Munich's second oldest brewery, getting their start in 1383. Their logo is a lion, and they have this cool animatronic lion that greets guests outside their tent at Oktoberfest. You might also be familiar with them if you're from the States, as this brand was licensed to breweries in North America.
We got a whole trunk full of Lowenbrau.
When you want the taste of a truly great American beer, tonight, let it be Lowenbrau.
Löwenbräu has been serving beer at Oktoberfest ever since the very first one, and they are now owned by AB InBev. Spatenbräu is the next oldest surviving Munich brewery, which was started in 1397. Spaten means spade, and their logo is of a malt shovel used in the brewing process. They are credited with replacing the darker Marzen-style beer with a lighter golden lager that we see at Oktoberfest today. They bought Löwenbräu in the 90s, and they are also now owned by AB InBev. The Hacker Brewery was started in 1417 and later merged with another brewery to become Hacker Schorr. As we learned earlier, Joseph Schorr was involved in brewing beer for the very first Oktoberfest. This somehow makes the fact that they don't actually brew their own beer anymore kind of sad. All beers with the Hacker Schorr label are actually brewed by their parent company, Polaner. This next one is by far the most complicated brewery we're going to talk about today. Hofbräu was started in 1589 by the Duke of Bavaria. Hofbräu literally means royal brewery in English, hence why their logo features a crown. Hofbräu runs the most famous beer hall in Munich, visited by millions of beer drinkers every year. This beer hall was also used as the headquarters of the National Socialist Party in 1920s Germany. Today, Hofbräu is owned by the Bavarian state government. The last brewery we're going to talk about today is Polaner, which was started by Minim friars in 1634. They first started serving beer on the Wiesn in 1818, and by 1881, Polaner was able to brew their beer year-round with use of an early ice machine. Today, it brews 13 different beers and is part owned by Heineken. All of the beer made for Oktoberfest is pretty similar, but there are some differences. For example, Hacker Schorr is the weakest at 5.8% ABV, and Hofbräu is the strongest at 6.3%. Augustiner is also still the only brewery to serve their beer from wooden barrels, which when I saw for the first time, I was simply amazed. The beer at Wiesn is all a fest-style beer, which I haven't found anything too similar to outside of Munich. And if you're from the States and you've ever had an Oktoberfest-style beer, just know that it's pretty much nothing like the real thing. The ones I've tried over the years are usually too dark, too malty, and sometimes they aren't even lagers. Oktoberfest today has grown to become the most iconic beer festival in the world that attracts 6 million visitors to Munich every year and drives over €1 billion into the local economy. Most of these visitors are actually from Bavaria, making up to 70% of the guests, with another 10% coming from other German states. The remaining 20% are foreign visitors, with the top countries being represented being Italy, USA, Austria, the UK, and Ireland. In the 1970s, the first Gay Days at Oktoberfest was organized, and it is now held every year on the first Sunday of Wiesn. It is the second biggest annual gay event in Munich after Christopher Street Day. During Wiesn, you will see a lot of traditional Bavarian clothing. Despite the origins of lederhosen being used for work and hunting, these clothes have regained popularity, and I've seen Germans wearing lederhosen and dirndls anytime throughout the year. Besides the beer tents, there are a lot of carnival rides and games for kids and adults alike, plenty of delicious food, and different tents that cater to everybody. Oktoberfest is open and there are no tickets to enter the Wiesn. However, the larger tents do take table reservations. Once you do make your way inside a tent, you will need to find a seat before you can order a beer. Most of the hosts serving these tables signed up to work at these events months or even years in advance. They have to lug around up to 40 kilograms of beer to keep the party going, and tips are very much appreciated. Being a vegetarian myself, I was a little worried I may not be able to find anything to eat. Happily, this has not been the case for me. The tents offer a variety of hearty dishes with veggie and vegan options, so everyone can enjoy some grub with their beer. You will also see servers walk throughout the beer hall selling smaller items, including baked goods like Bavarian pretzels should you want a snack. One of my favorite parts of all the tents were the live bands playing traditional Bavarian songs on instruments like accordions, tubas, and trumpets. You will hear the band play some catchy old Bavarian drinking songs, but don't worry too much if you can't understand the lyrics. I was struggling to figure out why I couldn't figure out the words to these songs until I realized, like everything here, it's Bavarian and not German. Either way, it's still a lot of fun to sing along with your table. If you aren't able to make it all the way to Munich, there are similar style events all across the world. I remember a few years ago, before I ever went to Munich, I went to the Baden-Baden Oktoberfest on a trip to Sao Paulo. This Brazilian Oktoberfest took place in the mountains in a town called Campos do Jordão. They had delicious beer served in these custom ceramic mugs, they had Bavarian food and live music and dancing, and to top it all off, the whole place looked like an alpine village, and it made me do a double take. It was a lot of fun, but to be honest, it was nothing like the one in Munich. The first time I went, I was just blown away by how many people were on the Wiesn at 11:30 in the morning on a weekday. Of course, this was before I realized how much vacation Europeans actually get. No joke, I've heard that some people take 2 weeks off to go to Wiesn every day. Anyway, we sit down at our table in the Löwenbräu tent, and it feels like we are in the middle of a living thing. The music, the singing, and the feeling you get by being surrounded by that much energy is just unforgettable. I remember meeting incredible people over the next 2 days, which for me was really what makes Wiesn so special. It's a celebration that brings everyone together. It's an experience that you get to share with your new friends from all over the world. It's a special place that only exists for a few weeks each year and then it's gone. If you've ever said that you want to make it to an Oktoberfest, I say don't wait. Move it to the very top of your list. Just don't be surprised if you fall in love with this place and never want to leave. I'm serious, you've been warned. I want to know what your favorite part of Oktoberfest is, or if I've missed a piece of its history that you'd like to share. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, Servus. Wait, how do you say it? Ach, Katzelschwoff? Is that right?